Radical centrist James O'Brien accused a caller of anti-Semitism for asking about Sangeeta Maiska. Now, if you haven't heard, a while back, LBC host Sangeeta Maiska was mysteriously fired from the show, and we still don't have an official reason, although many of us expect it to be this.
What the Iranians, of course, have said is that this is a retaliatory strike after Israel struck its consulate in Syria. Now, we all know that the way diplomacy works is consulates and embassies are considered sovereign territory of the government that is concerned. What Israel did by taking that action against Iran was escalate what is already an incredibly fragile situation.
Sangeeta, that's an outrageous framing of the reality.
It's not an outrageous framing. I've just been speaking to somebody who is a diplomat to Iran from the UK government. That's not an outrageous framing of it. What Israel did was strike what is considered in diplomatic circles the sovereign territory of Iran, whether we like it or not. No. And there was undoubtedly going to be a blowback. So did Israel game out what was going to happen next?
Firstly, I'm not going to speak directly to that strike. What I can say definitively, and this is why it's outrageous, I can say definitively is that wasn't an embassy, it wasn't a consulate, it wasn't any type of diplomatic mission.
It's been widely reported as that.
Because that's what Iran says. So would you like to copy and paste?
Are you suggesting every single news organisation in the world has got that wrong?
No, I'm suggesting that the Iranians have an interest to say that was a diplomatic mission when we know definitively it wasn't. Okay, because they then want to give you the response that you've just copied and pasted, with all due respect.
Well done to those of you who made it through that clip without throwing your phone at the wall. It's a very, very hard to watch. But watching Israeli spokespeople squirming their way out of questions is it's common practice now. So yes, that was an Israeli spokesperson defending Israel's attack on an Iranian consulate last year. Now, James O'Brien has said before that her sacking has nothing to do with talking about Palestine because he does it all the time, but rather due to viewing figures. But I suspect it was more of the fact that the entire mainstream media pretended that Israel was defending itself from Iran after Iran fired rockets at them last year, even though their attack on the Iranian embassy was before the rockets. Now, Maiska, as I'm aware, is one of the few mainstream journalists who's called out Israel's aggression. Now, in terms of viewing figures, well, her numbers were pretty good, as you can see there. Audience up 12.5%. Average audience rises to 465,000 listeners. Average audience up by over 52,000 listeners in just 3 months. So, I'm not sure what he's talking about there. Now, after a caller suggested that Maiska being fired from LBC may have something to do with her criticism of Israel or that particular interview, this is what James O'Brien had to say.
What happened to Sangeeta, even at LBC?
No, that's just rollicks, mate. And I mean, you can say it because you've got free speech, but that's just crap.
Thank you.
All right? We all sit in. I'll tell you something, because it bores me rigid, this, and I can't believe that certain people have allowed this lie to be perpetuated. We sit in a room every 3 months. Every single person that works here, we sit in a room every 3 months. They show us graphs of how our program is performing. Right? Everybody knows when someone's vulnerable. And it's not the graph of what audience you inherit when you come on air. It's a graph of how your audience falls or rises during the duration of your program. Every single person in this building sits in that room and watches a graph for every single program every 3 months. All right?
I don't want to get off topic.
No, you said it. You can't backtrack now, mate. You have decided you have decided to believe something that isn't true, and the only person that can prove to you that it isn't true has decided to stay silent and allow people like you to believe slurs and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories about her former colleagues. So
I didn't make an anti-Semitic slur or anything.
Yes, you are. You're claiming that someone has been censored or silenced when they haven't.
But that's not anti-Semitic. How's that anti-Semitic? That in itself is what's wrong with everything.
Okay, mate. I am setting the record straight on something, okay? And the idea that somebody would be silenced for being critical of Israel during a phone-in that is heavily critical of Israel is palpably absurd. You can dispute the fact that it's anti-Semitic. That's my opinion. And that is my freedom of speech that I am exercising, just as you are exercising yours. But if you choose to come on this program and tell lies about every single one of my colleagues, I will push back, okay? And that is what you are doing. I sympathise with you because the lies have been deliberately allowed to fester by somebody who can only answer for their own conduct.
He's such an insufferable prick, isn't he? I really, really dislike that man. Someone so arrogant yet so wrong so often. But I also love how he says, well, you've got the freedom to say what you want, and then continues to talk over him. This is insane. Of course, there is censorship when it comes to Israel and the media. Ever heard of Asa Winstanley, when his house was raided because of his journalism around Israel? Oh, but no, it's anti-Semitic. Sarah, what do you make of all of this? Isn't James O'Brien just so insufferable?
He is so insufferable. He's actually disgusting. Like, and you're so right. When you'd said that he'd said, "Well, you're free to say whatever you want," and then immediately just talks over the caller to drown him out. I think it dismisses the entire premise as anti-Semitic nonsense. Like, how exactly is that free speech? I think it's performative at best and almost authoritarian at worst. And this is someone who I really want to look into James O'Brien's history, because he has had past contradictions and missteps, and where he's actually praised anti-Semitic content. Let's not forget that last year, James O'Brien himself had to apologise for praising a social media video that contained outright anti-Semitic content and claiming he hadn't watched the whole thing. So if we're talking about accusations of anti-Semitism, maybe he needs to look a little bit carefully and before throwing those accusations at others before they've even been able to finish their point. But what I find really interesting, this kind of goes beyond James O'Brien. I can't stand him. I don't want to waste my breath on someone as incompetent as him. Oops. But I do think there's a well-documented pattern of journalists who take a critical stance on Israel and then face these professional consequences. Mehdi Hassan, people might have their criticisms of him, but he was let go from MSNBC because of his willingness to challenge US foreign policy, including its relationship with Israel. And then there was Mark Lamont Hill as well. He was fired from CNN for a speech calling equal rights for Palestinians. So I think it's a fair question that the caller's asking. Could the sacking actually be linked to her criticism of Israel? And I think given the ongoing media silence surrounding her dismissal, and I think the broader trend of journalists facing consequences for scrutinising Israeli state actions, it's not far-fetched.
I'd love for you to enlighten me, though. What was it he said that was supposedly anti-Semitic? I mean, I'm going to provide what I think he thinks it is, but I'm interested to hear what your response is.
What, the caller?
Yeah, I mean, James O'Brien was like, this is anti-Semitic.
Can I be completely honest with you? I couldn't even hear what the caller was saying because he kept berating, and it was honestly the sound of James O'Brien just beckoning and bellowing over the caller's voice, I think kind of shows that he is someone who seeks to silence free speech. I didn't hear any anti-Semitic rhetoric at all. Am I wrong? I didn't hear anything.
You're completely right.
I didn't hear anything.
I'm going to assume, though, I'm going to assume that James O'Brien was saying this call was anti-Semitic because he's buying into the lie that you can't criticize Israel or Israel will silence you, and it's kind of the sort of it taps into the anti-Semitic dog whistle that they control everything, right? Yes, there is an anti-Semitic dog whistle that says Jews control the world. It's not anti-Semitic, though, to clearly say there is an Israeli lobby in this country. The West, specifically the UK and the US, pretty much do whatever Israel wants because Israel is a settler colonial project, right? The West benefits from Israel being in the region. And we absolutely know that if you were to be pro-Palestine, it's a lot more difficult for you. And there have been, as I said, Asa Winstanley is one example. You've brought up Mark Lamont Hill and Mehdi Hassan, who have been kicked out of mainstream media because they've... Look, you can criticize Israel in the media, right? It's when, though, you attack Zionism, and it's when they deem you going too far. Now, specifically for me, why I think Sangeeta Maiska, I think the whole viewing figures thing is a load of rubbish, is because she specifically held that Israeli politician to account. I mean, I don't know, but maybe that Israeli politician contacted someone and said, we don't like this person. That is a bit conspiratorial, which is why I'm not saying it's a fact. But it was specifically when it came to Iran, right? So for viewers that don't know, last year, Israel attacked an Iranian consulate in Syria. They just did it, right? Unprovoked. It was an illegal act of war, what Israel did to Iran, okay? Then Iran fired rockets, because guess what? Iran has the right to defend themselves. And the media either largely ignored it or they said, oh my God, Iran's attacked Israel. So Sangeeta was one of the only few people in the mainstream media that brought up that lie. So it wasn't just about, okay, Israel maybe have gone a bit too far when it comes to Palestinians. No, she called out essentially the entire sort of premise of Israel, which is they are the aggressors in pretty much any war. So I think it went a bit further than that.
Yeah, she dared. Sorry, I just want to come in really quickly. She dared to challenge the official line, right? And now she's gone. But I just quickly on James O'Brien, because we need to be careful of people like him. He's a radical centrist, and these are the sorts of people who portray themselves as truth tellers and these enlightened, like, moderates who are supposedly above left and right, when in reality they're simply reinforcers of the neoliberal establishment friendly status quo. Like, that is exactly what he's like. And I think, yeah, he's insufferable, but he's actually more than that. He's dangerous because his kind of faux progressivism actively works to keep people uninformed and disengaged. And I think we should be calling that out.
I am so much in agreement with you, because I know the right-wing media is a danger, absolutely. And I think that Jeremy Corbyn was the most smeared politician that we've had for a very, very long time. And actually, James O'Brien pushed back on that and said, are you telling me that he's more smeared than Ed Miliband, when the Sun accused Ed Miliband's dead dad of being a traitor to the country? And the two things I would say to that is, one, well, I mean, the Sun also accused Jeremy Corbyn of being a terrorist. That's pretty bad. But two, it's not about the right-wing tabloid papers. It's about the BBC. It's about The Guardian. It's the so-called sensible voices and their bias. James O'Brien, still to this day, even though he does acknowledge, because he was on the receiving end of it, that when you do criticize Israel, you'll be called anti-Semitic. A caller called up James O'Brien at LBC, called him anti-Semitic. He was like, what the hell? And he acknowledged for the first ever time, because it happened to him, by the way, that actually some criticisms of Israel gets you labelled an anti-Semite. Yet he still prefaced that with, I still think that Jeremy Corbyn has a problem with anti-Semitism. Even after all of that, he would not do the same to Ed Miliband or any other politician. And then he said any leader of the Labour Party is going to be 20 points ahead. And look where Keir Starmer is now. He's been wrong on everything, but he then jumps on the popular thing later on, even when it comes to Israel-Palestine. For ages, he ignored it, or he was just basically pro-Israel. And then when he couldn't defend Israel, he has now criticised Israel. But it's far too late. People have no fucking integrity when you jump on something so much later. I mean, we were calling it a genocide from day one. Not just that, we've been calling out the occupation of Palestine for 75 years. Well, no, not that we've been doing it for 75 years, because I'm actually a little bit younger than 75, but we've been saying that it's existed for 75 years. Basically, people who call out when it's unpopular, that's where the integrity lies. James O'Brien has none of that, and now he's smearing this poor man as an anti-Semite. But I would like, I wish the caller said this, but I would like for him to say, right, are you going to go on record and say that was the reason why Sangeeta was fired then? Like, officially on record, is it because of viewing figures? Give me an answer. And James wouldn't be able to say yeah, because he can't officially say that's the reason, especially when the viewing figures was really, really good.
Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.